Each year, Microsoft Research hosts hundreds of influential speakers from around the world, including leading scientists, renowned experts in technology, book authors, and leading academics, and makes videos of these lectures freely available.
I've been to India 15 years ago, and then there was this first trip to Delhi. It was quite interesting. Lots of changes since then. So what I was hoping to tell you a bit more how this work fit in a part of the research agenda that we have. My team in Cambridge, England is called Integrated Systems, which really doesn't mean anything. Integrated Systems means do whatever you want to do. And we stayed in the area of information management and communication systems. But as you know, things in information has moved very fast. So initially, I remember I joined Microsoft Research about 15 years ago. And at that time, we were looking at browser and how people were browsing and why don't you have highlighting when you do search in the browser, or what were the browsing session. This was before Bing, by the way, where we were actually logging people, trying to understand what were the issues with browsing. And then we moved to general area of how would you search books, for example? When you have digital artifacts that are very complex, how can you get into more semantic search and so on? Most recent stuff, things moved towards social. So communication came in very strong. Communication and communication through media came very strong. And media is also sharing information. So information sharing and information management and searching, again, was kind of progressed. So as the field moves, we need to adjust our research agenda. That's why we have a progression there. And what I will be showing you today is something that has to do generally about digital. How do we deal with digital? In particular, what has happened to us is that we do not have any place where to put our digital assets. So I like to call this an era of, it's a feudal era. So I don't have a home for my digital stuff. Most of the people on Earth now have Facebook as their primary space where they keep the digital assets. I have things on my hard drive, but they can go bust anytime, so I don't really have much of control. I can put things in the Dropbox and SkyDrive, but then I'm putting in somebody else's territory, in somebody else's real estate. And my negotiation power, how much I owned it and how much I have control over it, is really minimal. So we are really talking about being homeless in a digital space. And so one vision of what we would like to understand is what would be a digital real estate. What would be something, how would it look if I had something that would last for my lifetime? And cloud is interesting, a cloud paradigm is coming in, so it's offering certain things. We're also spreading the devices and trying to think how we can stitch them up, so that's another thing. So in all this kind of ecosystem, can we think about what a digital estate would be? It's important, if not for us, it's important for our children, because what's happening is we are being pushed more and more towards services, being pushed towards digital. My kids do all their homework digital. I haven't seen anything on the paper for a while, except when they do art, okay? But then I have to scan it, okay? So in a way, so everything is going digital, and if you need to have something digital, it has to last for 100 years at least, because this is this is what my son tells me, Mom, you may have some hope. I probably will be living by 100 years old. All my organs can be replaced now. I can grow new tissue. My teeth can be renewed. So anyway, the kids are planning to live more than 100 years. We need to have infrastructure to support them in the digital world for 100 years. Okay. So this work comes because there is something in the design of digital that is not very transparent. So we design these complex computing systems, and then we decide what we're going to put in the interface. And who decides that? And what's the value proposition there? How do I decide what to present to users? So far, the value was, we're going to make it simple. Simple, and you'll be productive. So simplicity, productivity was the main driver. But then, as you will see now from a couple of examples, things are happening that people don't know, and they're repurposed in a way so that people have little control or even nothing to say about. And this is about the browser. So I will be discussing this issue of a lack of transparency in the design, which actually is a prerequisite if you're going to create systems that people will understand and be able to control for 100 years. Okay? And it's a really mini contribution to that bigger agenda. Okay. So it's about awareness, and in this particular case, the value proposition of the IE interfaces, you go and get information. Okay? And internet and web has been put forward to us as a big repository of information that you can get to for free. It's not really free, but you're paying internet providers to get you there. You think you're covered, so you pay and you're getting services. Now, this is what's happening when you look at the page. The number of other parties being involved. So all these little icons there or advertisements, they're coming from other parties, and people normally don't pay attention to that. They see it as a coherent thing, and they see it coming from the first party, meaning in this case, New York Times. This is what they're getting from New York Times. Okay? So what we are trying to understand, how people can become aware of what's on the interface, what the value proposition is when they are using a particular interface. In this case, by third party, we mean anybody who is being referred to by a first party. And unfortunately, most of these people who are third party are not there just to provide content, they're also tracking people. And I'm just here listing a couple of mechanisms, and you may be aware of it. And most of the people are aware that there are things happening. The precise mechanisms are not always very clear. Most of the time, the cookies are these little files that people put on your computer, and you can think of them as badges. So somebody gave me a badge. I have a cookie, say, I got a New York Times badge. So when I move around, people can see me that I had a New York Times badge. As I'm moving around, moving around means going from one side from another. And every time I land on another website, I can be asked whether I've got that badge, if that same company is associated with a news site. So that's how the cookies work. It's like I'm being tagged, and then people can watch me as I move around. But of course, this is nothing compared to other things that are happening. The real thing is that this sort of tagging on individual and tracking most of the time seems anonymous, so some kind of IP address, and I may have multiple devices, so who cares? I can fuzz that. The problem is when you have companies like Facebook, for example, or when you actually install the toolbar, or when you actually log in, and then from that point on, what you do is not anonymous anymore. And this is what people don't quite understand. So we've done research in this space, and kind of three different pillars. First one is about awareness and user interface. So what would be the process of designing interfaces so that people can first become aware? Because if they're not aware, then they cannot even express the choice. At the moment, they don't have a choice because they don't know what's happening. They're not asking for choice. And the second two things are just illustration of how, through different services, we get exposed to these trackers. But really, we use these two other studies, one with search, another one is social, meaning Twitter, just to illustrate the scale. So what we will see today is empirical study of the tracking network. Some properties, again, you can argue we use a machine learning and statistical analysis just to get the flavor of it. We haven't solved anything. So there are no, at the moment, no solutions. We've got some insights about user behavior, what is the threshold of sensitivity that's required to kind of move people to think about things. So a little bit of that, we made progress. But the other two things are really just for our own understanding, what's the scale of it and how to reason about it. Okay, so first just going back to see what we offer to people. If people wanted to do something about cookies, this is what they get. So on the left side, what's interesting, Microsoft gives you a slider and says, you want to reason about privacy? Well, you can. You can have a medium privacy. You can have high privacy or low privacy. Okay, it's very interesting. I mean, just this very concept that privacy has a scale is interesting, right? And then in Firefox, it doesn't do this, but it gives you options. Normally, as an option you can block all the cookies. And it's problematic because you will see cookies can come from the first party or third party. And the third party, among those that are third-party cookies, are the trackers. The ecosystem is very complex, so you have first-party for also trackers and so on. You'll see that in a minute. But it's really difficult. For Firefox, again, you have boxes and you can tick off things. Whatever you do will stay valid until you remove it. So the flexibility of this is such that it's not possible to change your settings based on your very active browsing. Just focusing a little bit more on Microsoft stuff. So suppose I bumped my thing up all the way and say I really want super privacy here. The problem is that there are multiple steps or multiple layers in the interface. So in this particular interface you have first in a normal privacy section you can say maximum privacy, and then you can go and check what advanced means. So here I'm checking what advanced means. And when I open it, I actually see that what is grayed out, the status is still to accept all the cookies. So now I'm thinking, in one part of the interface I bumped it up. If I look at the advanced, it doesn't seem like it took into account my decision. So then, of course, you can go in and you can uncheck it, but then you're kind of overriding the default, and you don't know what the default was. Is it the default that you set it up in the first place or not? So in a way, you see, even if people did want to reason about it and make some steps, it's really hard to unpick. And you can argue, well, this wasn't supposed to be for end users anyway. It was supposed to be for administrators who would understand more. I'm just hoping that also administrators will know what this means. So just going back, if you look at the medium one, if you just read what it says at the top, if you're making a decision, it says, in a medium it blocks third-party cookies that do not have a compact privacy policy. Okay? So there are a lot of notions here that I don't know whether administrators would know either, because this is a legal language. And so it's not very clear who this is for. And it seems a bit more of a patchwork rather than a thought-through process. Okay, so I think I made point. At the moment, people are not aware, and whatever control we provide to people who are aware is a little bit confusing. And so for the general public, we're thinking, what would be the process of moving people from total ignorance to some sort of action? And in order to design and reason about this a bit, we were just looking at the work that was done previously by the warnings. So assuming that cookies are not desirable, so assuming, and you want to warn people, what would be the process you would like to walk them through? And on the right-hand side, this is a particular framework which is called Communication Human Information Processing Framework that says you have a channel of communication. In that channel of communication, you have a recipient, and then what's going to happen is you have to get their attention first. And then you're hoping that they're going to engage into some reasoning, and there's a comprehension part. And then after that, even if they understand that something is happening, they may say, okay, that's fine, I don't really care. So there's a certain set of beliefs and attitudes towards it. So you may need to think about, if you want them to change because it's dangerous for them, then you have to think about how to change the beliefs. And in order for them to change the beliefs, they need to be motivated to listen or even be motivated to act. So it's a very complex process. To getting people from total unawareness to action is a very long process. And so what we're hoping now to do is just get their attention and maybe get a little bit of a comprehension, just that bit. We tried, I mentioned before, the box that people had to tick off were sort of almost like an offline process. When you're online, you would have to go back or continuously check changing the status. So we're looking at whether there is something that we can do in real time. So when people are browsing, maybe they can act. Or we don't really know when is the right timing. So you may be aware, but there are a number of plugins for browsers. Among them are Ghostery. Ghostery keeps a track of cookies, and then it has a little interface showing which domains were associated so far. You can tick them off if you want them to disappear, and so on. But it wasn't really completely real time, and you couldn't get an idea how powerful a cookie is or how connected the cookie is within the ecosystem. So we decided to implement another prototype I'll show you now for Firefox, and that one is based on the principle I'll show it to you in real time what's happening. Okay, and let me just fire off. So I'm going to go to New York Times just to show you what's going to happen to New York Times. So if I go to New York Times, that very moment, all these cookies are downloaded on my computer. So things that fell off the, and let me just repeat it, the things that fell off the page, or the top of the page, are for each domain a number of cookies that are in. So each of these here is representing a third-party domain. The green one is New York Times. So the New York Times one includes 41 cookies that are now on my computer. And you can argue, well, these are fine. I don't really care. New York Times claim that they need them. So, okay, they need them to run their website. That's fine. Okay. So I'm kind of assuming we have, I and New York Times have an agreement, because this is where I went to. Now, I just don't know what these other ones are doing. So here's another one. This is DoubleClick. DoubleClick has only 3 cookies. But these 3 cookies have been installed on 87 other sites that I visited. And so as I go around, then DoubleClick knows that I've been in these sites. They probably have session information. Who knows what they have? And so I don't really know what they have. All I know is that whenever I visited these sites, they knew about it. And you see, the height of the bar means how many cookies. The redness of it, or the color of it, depends on how many other domains were involved. Okay. All right, so we showed this to people, and believe it or not, but lots of people didn't even click on these things because didn't know that they can click on them. Maybe we did give them a tutorial so that they would understand a little bit how to use the interface. But the real key was that people were just there to read the news. So we're not getting them at the right time. People have a task in mind. So whatever you do at that moment, you are offering a trade-off between immediate need or immediate desire for information and then attention to something else that never hurt them. They were not ever bleeding. Nobody ever attacked them. So it's really hard to comprehend what the implications of this are. So we decided then to have a conversation with these people. We had about 15 of them using it for a while. We put them in 3 different conditions. One, nothing, so no interface whatsoever. One with ghostery and one with ours, just to see whether the attitude changes and how they would react generally if you show them the scale of tracking. There was not much difference in the attitude before or after the study, so people didn't get much better idea of what's going on with cookies. So even if you give them at the same time, give them a list of cookies or give them these real-time bars, it didn't really make much difference on the attitude and beliefs. Yeah.
If you had done this to a group of developers upstairs, do you think it would have been any different?
In fact, we have a development center in Belgrade, and we said, okay, guys, do you want to try it? And they said, well, we're already blocking everything. So the developers actually already controlling the exposure. So for them, so technical people seem to be aware, and they already taken measures to do this. So with developers, we didn't. This was like a little gimmick. They were using other methods already. So lots of them are just browsing the private mode, which private mode browsing normally cuts down all the cookies, but you lose your history. So it's the problem. They've been using the ghostery because through ghostery you can manage over which period you can block certain domains and so on. So with developers, I don't really know how you partition the kind of market. Do you partition it based on technical abilities, like education? Do you partition it based on whether people behaviors, like whether attitudes, whether they care or not care? I don't really know at the moment. But what we've done as a follow-up, we actually showed people a different representation of this. It is a network representation. So let me show you. This is a graph, a network created based on a log for one person for 7 days. And I'm just filtering out a little bit so you can see. So we created this network by simply pulling information from the log. We have a pair, a domain the person visited, and then cookies or third party that were referred to. So this is what we call a referral network. And you will find information about what's referred to in a HTTP header, so it's easy to parse and get out. So in this particular case, I'll just show you an example. If I go to Forbes, so the person went to the Forbes website. At that moment, it is these cookies, these third parties that got involved. So they were referred to by Forbes. Among them are different types of nodes. When you're looking at network analysis, you can look at the inlinks and outlinks. All of these green dots are websites. So if I look, for example, at DoubleClick, DoubleClick is connected with all the other sites, many of these green sites, and also with some of the red sites. So if you look at the edges going from the green to DoubleClick, meaning that whenever I landed on a website, the website referred to DoubleClick, but also DoubleClick referred to some other companies like advertising.com or Mookie1.com or mediaplex.com. Okay, so obviously DoubleClick has a very interesting role. It is a broker, so it goes from the website and then goes to the other trackers or other nodes in the advertising system. And people who are in advertising know better. These are probably ad servers serving the ads, or it may be servers that are bidding, because DoubleClick now says, here's the person landing at Forbes. Here's the person also who was there before at EasyJet. So who wants to bid for the next move? And so when the person goes to the next site, which advertisement will be shown? Yeah. Interestingly, there are other nodes like Google Analytics, the purple ones, or Scold Calc Research. They are very similar. If you look at them, they primarily have inlinks. So the sites are referring to them. Very rarely they have another edge going to some other tracker or some, yeah. So these companies sell specific type of services to individual websites. They say, we will analyze your website. So whenever somebody lands on your site, please just refer to us. We will collect the analytics and we'll serve it back to you. So it's two different value propositions. DoubleClick is tracking people across the sites and enabling these companies, the green dots, to do what we call marketing campaigns. Okay, so the value proposition is marketing campaigns. For the Google Analytics, it's vertically optimizing a website. Whereas the citizen, whereas the user, is outside this network. It doesn't feature anywhere here. And this is the web. And that's why I call this World Wide Web. It's the international tracking system, which is sitting on top of information system of the web. Yeah, and so it doesn't matter where you are. You as a citizen or user, you just tap on the website and you're part of this network. You can't escape because it is the property of the web. It's not property of my behavior. It is really the web. So in this particular case, we're just looking, we're observing the network that is based on the browsing. And then I'll show you later what it looks like. If you look at if you really want to understand now how broad DoubleClick is covering the web, then you have to apply different methods, because this is just based on an individual. So we show this to people, and we have transcripts of the interviews. It's really interesting. So you have a conversation about cookie tracking. I say, oh yeah, and then you come to this point, and they go, oh, is that how it's done? And then the next thing, and what can I do? And we say, well, we'll have that conversation later because we don't know what you can do. You can't debug the web. This is the problem. We can try to protect people not to step on certain places, but it's really hard because the servers is tracking on the server side, not only just checking on the client side. So yeah. So we don't have a solution, but we're trying to increase the awareness, because one thing would be the companies like Forbes and New York Times, it is them who have a business with the third parties. So I'm not sure how New York Times will feel if we actually expose this and say, New York Times, yes, you're selling news. We're going to tell the world also how many other companies you associate with your site. Okay, so maybe we can play in that card and say, look, you should be informing your readers that when they stop on your website, and if they don't like it, well, maybe you should provide them another page, which is a different sort of page, where you don't have this tracking. Now, whether that's going to ever happen, we don't know. It's just an interesting thought. Okay. Yes?
Because it's a trade-off, isn't it? That's the problem, because what New York Times will be getting something out of that is probably the ability to run their website for free, if it's a free one, I don't know.
Yeah.
Something you have to pay for, and then they have no excuse.
Yeah.
The ones that are providing you with information for free, they have to run their business in some way.
Yes.
And then the problem with informing, so a lot of British sites right now have this thing at the top where they say, we use cookies.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I know what that means.
Yeah.
Do you know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah.
I want to listen to the news on
Yeah.
BBC, so I'm
Yeah.
going to have to say yes. 'Cause
Yes.
otherwise I can't. I can, you know.
Yes.
So it's the whole, there's such a murky issue, isn't it?
Yes.
There's, as you say, the whole thing about where you have choice or where you don't have
Yes.
choice. You're actually quite limited because they always say, you know, same with the captures, oh, you can not use the service. And
Yeah.
you're like, well, I sort of need to use my banking.
Yes.
So
Yes, exactly.
it's
So,
really murky.
but if the public doesn't know first, then they cannot they cannot even express their choices. So the fact that now they say, we use cookies, take it or leave it. They don't say we use trackers on our website. Because we don't mind if they use their cookies to run the site. But the fact that they're using trackers, then they're basically selling us. This is very interesting. They're selling information and we have no choice. And we don't know what the consequences are. So it's really unknown. Maybe there's no harm done. And maybe we cannot argue about harm now. But we can definitely argue about preferences. Because if the society does respect privacy, so it's not universal. In some, you know, if you were born in former Russia, then you have no privacy. Okay, so that's not this is a mute kind of argument. But things are changing. So even in Russia, things are changing. So we would like people to become aware, and then we hope that they will be expressing the preference, and then we hope that there will be policy change. Because the reason why this is happening is because there is no control. What's also interesting is we have, in industry, we have two camps. There are companies that have lots of data about their customers. These are like 3M's, Procter & Gamble. These are companies, L'Oreal. You know, these are companies that have relationship with customers. They have lots of data about them. But they are now on the same attack, if you wish, or privacy attacks, as the companies like these who are cowboys. The reason why they're doing this is because nobody knows. Nobody is watching this. And you know, the conversation with the governments, especially in the UK, they don't really know the extent of this. And then when they're looking at it, guess what the thought is? Ooh, DoubleClick has got lots of information. Ooh, we cannot actually put an ID, national ID in place, but we can talk to DoubleClick. So in a way, they can get this information about citizens from the commercial sector. So there will be a balance even there. We cannot really assume that governments will work for the citizens necessarily.
Can you put this in a kind of a historical perspective? And I don't know if maybe that's not your area, but to me, I'm always interested in that question of, you know, how does this compare to, are we really being tracked like at no other time? Or is it that back then we wouldn't go anywhere so nobody cared about us? I mean, you know, what are the kind of historical parallels, or are there not? You know, how do you put this in context?
So I do believe that tracking has been done by national security agencies all the time. So on one side, if you're being tracked by your own government, people don't like it, but they also there's a balance because they will protect you if something is wrong. So you feel that you're going to elect a government who's going to protect you. At the same time, government has jails. Okay, so in a way, there is also another aspect of the government. We are being tracked now by international companies who are in the business of selling advertisements. We do not necessarily have to be aware. They don't have jails, do they? So even if you do something wrong, there's nobody to punish in this world, okay? Unless now governments go in and say, well, this person looked at porn, okay, we want this person, give it to us. And at the moment, because this is international, of course, in some countries that is more harmful and others less. If a woman in Jordan goes and looks at the contraception, it's going to be different from a woman in the United States. And so how can then companies that are kind of digital technologies, computer technologies companies going to design so that people who would like to control their privacy can do that? Because inadvertently they can be exposed to regimes that are not adhering to the same set of values. Okay. So privacy in general is very different from security. When we talked about context, we often talk about security that is provided to us by national bodies, organizations, and so on. This is different. This is privacy. Privacy is highly contextual. As I said, if my 16-year-old daughter goes and looks at the hotels, and I look and I see these hotels advertised as she moves around, okay, I'll be asking her, well, what's going on? I know you have a party on Saturday. Why do you need a hotel? Okay, well, she would not like it, right? Because, okay, why did Google Advertising now reveal that she's looking at it? She was just maybe just looking at it. Okay, and then she get grounded and no party. It's okay. So, okay, so the consequences are not life-threatening, perhaps, but in some instances there are, and they are highly contextual. Yeah. So what we are hoping basically with this, we don't really know, if you show this to people you can shock them, but whether that will then take any further action. As you remember, you have comprehension, and then you have motivation, beliefs and behaviors, and then motivation for change. And how can you move these people to sign a petition or go and argue in Congress or whatever that needs to be done at the social change level. Okay, so but I'll just move on quickly to show you. So the main point here was, yes, we are being tracked, and the user interfaces are not telling us much about it. The next two things are just going to be about the scope. So just to understand a little bit about the ecosystem. This is now more of a kind of economic view of it. And people who are working in Bing may like to see this. Just putting in perspective what search means in this context. So web, we know now, is all bugged. Why is it bugged? It's bugged because the websites actually engage third parties track us, or third party deliver advertising. Advertising is based on what we call real-time tracking, and they can start behavioral modeling. And so in order to understand what happens to us when we do search, we decided to run a number of experiments. We took a corpus of about 600, original corpus had about 800 queries, and these were from KDD CUP 2005. So you can argue these are all queries. But what was good about this corpus is because it's publicly available, so other people can reproduce the experiments. But also, they had it was done at the time when we were very interested in categories of queries. So it was done as a part of the competition to categorize queries. So that enabled us to pick queries in certain categories and see whether tracking is different if you are, say, searching for shopping, or you are going on some kind of government site, a legal site. So just to see whether there's any difference. So we ran about 600 queries for which we were sure that the labels were correct. And we ran them in with two different engines, so it's Bing and Google. We've done it in 4 different markets, in India, South Africa, United Kingdom, United States, primarily because the queries were in English, and the results were in English, we thought it would be. So we then, for each query in each market, we look at the top 10 results. And then for each of the 10 results, we looked at the trackers. Okay. So then we looked at the network. So this is a graph of what we call a connected component. So we know the network is huge, but then we just said, give us the connected component in this graph. And this kind of jumbled thing is combination of websites, so unique websites that we've seen for these 600 queries. This is in the Indian market. The red bits are third parties, so either trackers or the delivery of advertisements. Now you can see it's very, very densely connected, and we tried to spread it a little bit. So we pushed to the clustering algorithm and kind of get them in the clusters, which means that they're all connected, but some of them are more connected than others. So you can see the kind of circles of these dark dots, which are websites. They are obviously connecting with specific brokers or advertising agencies. It is often the case that the same site has multiple of them. What you see in the middle are the big trackers. So, and you can see they have little markets, if you wish, sub-markets. Yeah, so this is what we found in the Indian market, and then this is Google in the United States market. There's not really much difference. And I can show you that there's not much difference. Just look at the statistics. So this is a table that shows the statistics on the properties of the networks, but the most important things are on the bottom, showing that for each of the vertical, which is the market, we just look at how many nodes are in this connected component. And you can see very large number, 92% of the nodes are in the big component. And then if you look at the edges, almost 99%, meaning that the nodes that are outside are really not very well connected, so they don't really count for much. Yeah. So anyway, this is just showing if you basically use search, then you will become part of this. You're immediately being tracked. A couple of other things about the property of this network. It behaves like a small world network, which means they're shallow and very, very, very good for propagating information. Okay, so we just did some experiments. What happens if you remove double-click? How disturbed that network becomes. And it becomes less effective, in fact. So the two graphs show that in a simulation, on the left side, the number of dots that goes like this represent the small world networks. And our network is very closely aligned with the properties. If you're on the right-hand side, if you remove, you can see that our network actually is away from the ideal small world network. And another thing, we've done a little bit in the Chinese market where these things are just emerging. And this is the Chinese market. We had only 100 queries. It's very, very similarly to DoubleClick and Google Analytics. You have two different companies. They have the same, so it's Baidu.com, which behaves similarly to DoubleClick, and then QQN is behaving like Google Analytics. So it's interesting. This phenomenon is happening in other markets as well. And now, just to reflect a little bit what this means. So, because I'm in information retrieval, we are also thinking a lot how to improve search, what sort of things to do. But the fact is that however well we improve search, it doesn't matter. It's going to get into DoubleClick hands. Because it's whatever you do, it really doesn't really matter. The money is being made in a different way. And we know this, sort of. We do know. But I mean, this just tells the story eloquently. So then the question really is, what sort of battle do we fight? This is just showing that how quickly I as an individual become tracked when I'm using search. Yeah. So essentially, this is saying that if you look at the graph here, this just shows you on the bottom how many clicks: 10 clicks, 20 clicks, 30 clicks, 40 clicks, and this just tells me the probability that I will be tracked either, say, by all top 10 trackers. So the red one shows me what is the likelihood that I'm going to be tracked by top 10 trackers. And it says that it is more than 99% if I did 30 clicks in my life. If I did only 20 clicks in my life, it's 90%. So this is not even precision. This is just clicking in on the top search results, and this is it. So if I wanted to clear my cookies, I really need to be clearing very fast. Yeah, I can't relax at all. I have to have a little robot doing this for me. Yeah, and it won't work if I just clear them. I probably need to be more sophisticated. I have to do something with my IP address. I may need to change the configuration of my system all the time because they're fingerprinting me and so on. Okay, so that's the news on the tracking. Finally, there was no difference really about which topic you were tracking. As you can see, it doesn't really matter. A little bit less tracking happens on information law and politics and information science and technology. So that means that these companies, legal companies, probably would be more careful not to lose their face. So they may not be aligning with trackers that often. The similar thing maybe with IT industry, they know what it means, so maybe they would not do that to the people who are visiting it. So we don't know, but it's basically slightly less than for others. Good. Okay, and the final push, I know this is getting too much information, just 5 minutes, just to look at another aspect of this. And so we now know that the web is bugged. We know that we can't escape. The question then is, knowing that, how do we behave in social network environments? So what is the problem? Well, the problem is that if you basically go on Twitter or in Facebook, or even if you send you an email. Suppose I send you an email and I put a URL in. Okay, so I said, this is fantastic BBC article, go and check it out. And suppose also that I protected myself from cookies. Should I tell you that if you open this site, you should also be careful and protect yourself from the cookies? Okay, so it's really about social responsibilities. So far, sharing information has been seen as a very, very positive thing. And now the question is, when you're sharing information, is it your responsibility to warn the recipients that the site may be contaminated, if you wish, and then you decontaminate yourself, but they should do the same thing. Yeah. It is very tricky. So this is what we've done. Again, we looked at the Twitter data just to see a little bit how often people share things among themselves. And we checked the hashtags on topics, and also there are hashtags related to following a particular user. And so we had about 20 of the users' hashtags and topics based. And for the analysis on the topics base, we had about 5 million tweets. And then for the top users, about 8 million tweets. Among them, we just looked at those that had URLs in them. And it's a very small percentage. It's not large, which is really good, I thought. But still, there is enough that the people get tracked. So these are the companies that are being used. So this is the URL distribution in a top user data set. So what are the companies that we normally retweet about? It's YouTube, and you should also see that because of the shortening of URLs, the same company is being referred. It's just it looks different. So YouTube and u.be is the same thing. And then we also looked at the number of third parties associated with them. And okay, YouTube is not too bad. You can argue only 12 trackers, but then you get to Tumblr at 246, and then you ask yourself, why is that? And you realize I don't use Tumblr, but I looked at it in a little bit. So there you can create your own kind of little site where you can show who you are and share things. And of course, each person who uses Tumblr may have different set of trackers associated, okay, depending on what sort of things they put there. Yeah. So that's why this site looks very bad. But otherwise, as I said, per person is not too bad. Okay, then we did a network analysis both for the topics, just to look at the edges and nodes. And I just want to show you how the social part looked like. So we used the topic on politics and looked at the connected components. So on the right-hand side, these are lots of people who retweet URLs, but they're not very well connected. You have what we call distribution lists. So these will be tweeting all the time URLs. And then you have the social part where different topics appear, people retweet to each other. In this case, the nodes, the red nodes and the black nodes are really all people. This is not about trackers or anything, just people. And the size, I think here refers to the number of followers. And the redness means how often the person is active in retweeting. And these two things are not always the same. Okay. But people who are retweeting in this case, we know they're spreading things. So, and then the biggest component, this one here, we just again clustered it a bit further, and you can see little sub groups of people who are retweeting to each other. And from the perspective of URL tracking, those are the people who contaminate each other continuously. Okay, so they're basically sharing the trackers. Okay, all right. So it was just interesting to see how these things happen. And then we looked at the trackers a little bit more. Let me not bother you with this. But one thing I wanted to show you is just this. After we analyzed the network of the trackers based on the search and based on these tweets, we basically now just looking at the types of trackers. And there are different categories. That's why it's so complicated. And that's why I get angry when I see this sweeping statement, we are using cookies, take it or leave it. Because it's very complex, in fact. The roles of these trackers is different. So the red ones are double-clicks of the world. So these are the brokers. Okay? And then the green ones are the ends of the path in the network. Those are the companies that deliver ads. So after the brokering is done, they kind of bring things in. But the blue ones are the ones that are really scary. Why is that? Because double-click, I never go. I never seen double-click. I don't go to their website. Similarly, the green ones are the ad providers. I don't ever see them. But the blue ones have a dual role. These are the companies that actually have websites, like Facebook. So I go to Facebook. Facebook give me a certain, there is a value proposition when I use Facebook. But Facebook doesn't tell me that it's tracking me across sites. I can forgive them for doing it within a site. But why are they doing it across sites? That was not an agreement. Yeah? And what they do is the little Facebook sign that you see across websites now, these are their marketing campaigns. So whenever you see a website with F on it, you know you're being tracked. Because that information goes to them directly. If you are also logged in, incidentally, they will know it's you. Okay. So in a way, the most disturbing to me is these blue things, because the business model there is double dipping. So they get my information, that they can make money of it, and then they also go around and track me, and I have no idea really what else they're doing.
I think you lost your mic.
Oh, sorry. So again, in this network, you can see the different roles. Often, when you go to, say, eHow, you do search, and you have this eHow website, and eHow knows everything. Whatever you ask on the web, they have an answer for it, and then you realize there's nothing else but a nest of trackers. Similarly, so just from this kind of network, a little bit of the ecosystem understanding. Why is this all happening? Well, it's happening because we know from the beginning of times that the vendors always wanted to have a relationship with consumers. Now, when we went digital and e-commerce started, we didn't provide anything to them to establish the link between their businesses and consumers. There was nothing. Okay. We had a generic browser with generic HTTP protocols, and guess what? It was then used for it. It wasn't, each of these vendors, say, suppose BMW, will have their own site, but they also want to advertise on other sites, because just on their site is not enough. So that's why we have, on the left side, we have a demand. We have people who would like to advertise. And then everybody else on the web is a supplier. They can accept advertisement on their real estate. So then on the right-hand side, we have websites who are supplying space. Okay, so it would be inefficient if each vendor will communicate with everybody. Just you may do it with a friend. Okay, we'll do some kind of cross-posting. That's why this centralized role occurred. So that's why DoubleClick stepped in and said, okay, no problem. We will do the communication between the demand and supply. And so that's why they're doing it. Exchange services are right there. Yeah. So this is what we are observing in our website studies so far. We are observing just what's going on the supply side. We don't really see much on the demand side, but we can definitely see the patterns on the web. Yeah. So as I said, we didn't solve anything. We just have a better understanding what it is. And I like this irony. In computer science, we work very hard to bring computer to the masses. And the WYSIWYG interface sort of revolutionized. In the early computing era, we had only mathematicians, statisticians, computer scientists writing programs to do calculations for building bridges. But then we came with the WYSIWYG interface to remove people from programming so that they can be domain experts and use computers. So WYSIWYG proposition was a very good proposition. The problem is that we went too far. So that we abstracted things so far that people don't really know what's happening. And so what you don't see is, in this case, is what you pay. And you're paying with your personal data and with privacy. Yeah. So generally, I mean, this design investigation will continue. We will probably have to join forces on many levels, looking at lower layers, design layers, and then somebody will have to speak for us when it comes to the policy. I'm actually hoping that we will be able to displace this, not necessarily by regulations, but by other forces. So if you have a business, fight it with the business. Okay, if this came in place because there was a business need and it wasn't satisfied, and it's satisfied now in a way that we don't like, maybe we should come in with another business proposition to the vendors and say, no, we will be able to show you, help you achieve what you really want. You really want to have a relationship with your customers. And maybe Skype would be the right technology. Now we have technologies where we can embed communication in websites, web pages even. So then perhaps by offering another way to vendors to connect with customers, we can displace the brokers. Because they're there only because the vendors can't do it. Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you.
Has anyone advocated an approach where you protect your privacy not by
disclosing less, but actually by simulating visits to more sites than you actually touch.
Yeah, so creating noise in the system.
Sure.
Yeah. So that would be one strategy. Some people, again, people who know how to do it, they would have a little bots and they just work on them to disguise themselves. But that would be one strategy. Yeah. One technical strategy. Yeah.
So I
Please.
guess in the US there's been a lot of talk of these, I don't know if they're called black nets. So is that the other strategy, or is that a different kind of animal?
Yeah, I don't know much about black. Can you tell me more about
I guess the black net is just a system you go into where basically they can't track you.
Oh,
Go in
yeah.
there either to, whistleblowers will go in there with journalists,
Okay.
or narcos will go in there with other, so it's
Yeah.
kind of I don't
Yeah.
know, I just heard about it, I was like, oh my goodness.
Yeah.
This be like Silk Road kind of thing? Or
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, I only learned from the developers who are on our team about this. We call them black nets. They call them dark web, and these are the things that nobody under the sun can ever discover. No police, no federal agencies can get to them. In a way, question only is why are we pushed all the way to that in that direction? I mean, we should be able to express our preferences and have it delivered to us. It's just that I don't quite know whether. I'm assuming that if there is a demand, then there will be a supply. Therefore, if you inform people and then we create the demands, there will be options. And that's what I'm just hoping. I know it's very depressing. I'll let you think about it. It just every time we think about this again, it's just thinking about the future and future. Often people say, well, children don't care about privacy. As I said just before, my kids care about privacy. It's just a different sense of it. Yeah, it's whether they would care with a DoubleClick cannot ground them. So this is the thing. DoubleClick is not going to harm them that way. But we know that there is an issue more and more now. The people being profiled. And I was in conversation with very enthusiastic students at the University College London. They've so proudly shown me a profile. They said, look, Natasha, we have a technology now that instead of them delivering rubbish ads, you can go and you can edit your profile. So they built the infrastructure for this. And then they also proudly showed me Microsoft profile of one of them, Google profile, and there's 7 others. And then my question then was, and you're going to go and edit all of them? And so for now you have about 7 of them. And if this takes off, soon it's going to be 10,000 of them. So how are you going to then go and add your modify profiles for each of these companies to do the job better for you? They didn't have an answer. But the main, disturbing point was that the negotiation point was moved very far from where I would like to be. Negotiation is, they got my data. They're not even letting me erase it. I can modify it, but that's it. So the negotiation power is that far from where I would like to be. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Much.